20-some years ago, I got into my head that I wanted to learn how to fly an airplane. I know that was really a stupid idea. However, it was actually really fun, except that at some point in training, you have to learn how to fly at night. And the first time I did this was a terrifying, very beautiful, but terrifying thing. You see, you're at a runway, the runway's all lit up so you can see, you get off there, and then you're around the airport and you can sort of see it. But once you get past the airport, nothing looks like what it did. Nothing is recognizable. It's just black, and there's little dots of light somewhere around here, but you have no idea what they are. And all of a sudden you're up there, you can't see a thing, and you can't really even tell what is up and what is down. Your perception is all completely mixed up. And then you realize, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know how to get back down. Fortunately for me, I had an instructor next to me, and he says, I'll take care of you. But he also said, there's a point where I'm not going to be in this plane with you, and then you have to trust the instruments. There are a couple of instruments that keep you alive in an airplane, especially when you're flying at night. Because when you're flying at night, you can't trust what your body perceives. Minnie's the pilot who, without these instruments, has flown straight into the ground thinking they were going up. And so he says, there's this little instrument that says, here's the horizon, here's the ground. Keep it at the horizon. Don't let it go to the ground. And you say, but it feels like I'm going down. You're not. You have to trust an instrument, this inanimate object, to keep you alive. I didn't like that because I didn't trust it. Because it doesn't feel right. I don't know about you, but trust is a very difficult thing. Especially when you don't know where you're going, you can't see where things are, and you simply have to just leave your life in the hands of this little thing. So trust is not easy. It actually has never been easy. In fact, if you look at our faith, it is the entire story of our faith, which is to say, God says, trust, and we say, All of our history with God is this little voice whispering through the ages, I will bring you home. That's it. So it's no coincidence that our Old Testament reading, as well as our reading from the epistle, they both address one of the oldest stories in our faith. A story that is so improbable, it just might be true. A story where this guy named Abram hears God. And based on one promise, almost entirely on one promise, he leaves his home, he packs up his family, and he goes out into the wild unknown. In fact, out into a hostile environment. And what is that promise? It's a simple enough promise. It is, you will have children. He's not been able to have children so far. Sarah, his wife, has not been able to have children so far. And so based on this one promise, where God says, trust me, follow me, and you will have children. And not just children, but lots of children. Based on that, he goes. There's just one problem with this promise. Abraham follows this voice of God for years, decades, and no kid. The promise is not kept. The promise isn't fulfilled. And at some point, we catch this in today's reading, Abraham's like, what's going on? All this time, and I still don't have a kid. I'm going to have to leave everything I own to the slave Eliezer of Damascus. In response, God says, trust me. You will have the child I promised. And sure enough, shortly after this, not exactly how he expected, but right after this, Sarah, his wife, goes to him and says, I haven't been able to have kids with you, so take my slave Hagar, have a child with her for me. Thus, Ishmael is born. And the promise, if you go by technicality, the promise is fulfilled. Abraham has a child. Now, the writer of Hebrews wants to make clear that, in fact, the promise was doubly fulfilled because years later, when Abraham is around 100 years old, according to their story, and Sarah is well in her 80s or 90s, Sarah has a child too, Isaac. And so the promise truly is fulfilled. Eventually, at the end of their lives. It is so hard to trust when it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. It's so hard to trust when you do not know where you're going and you can't see the way ahead. When you don't know what you're doing and you sit there and say to yourself, why? Why am I doing this? It is so hard to trust. Which sort of brings to mind our gospel today, where Jesus is talking to the disciples. And he says, it is your Father's good will to give you the kingdom. So, sell your things. Give them as alms. Leave and follow me. Be like the servant who is going to stay up all night long, if that's what it takes. Not knowing when the master is going to return, but who will be ready at all times. Be like that person. And you say, how can I do that? That's too hard. I don't know if I'm really going to inherit the kingdom. Frankly, this isn't something we can know in this life. None of us is going to know this until we die. And I'm just not that anxious to find out yet, so I'll have to wait. But here's the thing. We don't know what we're doing in this world. We don't know where we're going. Are we going to the kingdom? Can we trust what Jesus says when the only insurance he gives us is the promise? And that little phrase, trust me. It's very reassuring. So how do we approach this? How do we trust when he says, give away everything? And in the back of your mind, you're saying, wait a minute, I've got a family to take care of. How do we trust when he says, leave things behind and follow me? And you say, I got a mortgage. I have a home. I have people. How can I leave them? I can't do it. It's not possible. Or is it? The voice that we hear, the voice of God, is infuriating in a lot of ways. And one of those ways is it's not constant. It's not loud. And yet, it's there. And so, we keep living as if the kingdom is just ahead. We keep coming to church. We keep praying so that we can hear that voice better. We keep serving the poor. We keep feeding the hungry. We keep working for the disenfranchised. We keep loving those who hate us. Even though we have no 100% guarantee, and we're sort of people who like our guarantees. We like to see things. And God infuriatingly says, no, you don't get to see. You don't get to have it right now. Did you catch in Hebrews where he says, the promise is fulfilled, but it may not be fulfilled in your lifetime. Think of all those like Moses who had the promise and yet did not get to see it except from afar. Moses led the people 40 years. That's 4 decades, the last 40 years of his life, and did not get to enter the promised land. But he did get to see it. And the author of Hebrews says, so often that is what the promise is like. We do not get to exactly see it. We just get to view it from afar. That's a tough thing to live with. Because I want to know right now if everything's going to be okay. I want to see, I want evidence that everything's going to be right here, right now. We're really evidence-based people, which may be one of the reasons why in our society a lot of folks say, I don't need that. I'm just going to give up on the entire proposition. Because trust is really hard when you can't see, when you're flying blind. But we do. We keep trusting. We keep flying. We keep moving forward. We keep listening for that little voice that is whispering to us, I will bring you home. I will bring you home. I will bring you home. We do this because we know something. Not only that serving others kind of makes us feel better, but we know in our hearts and from our experience and from the experiences of countless others throughout the ages, we know that even if we can't quite touch it, there is something. And that something calls to us. Sometimes it's practically inaudible. Sometimes it's really hard to catch, or it seems like a dream that's vanishing away. But it's something that will not quite disappear. And that's enough. That's enough to hang on to. That's just that little tiny instrument in this big airplane that's going to keep you going in the right direction. Because in the end, that voice tells us something we know in our souls. That it is leading us home. And there is nothing and no one else who can promise that. Amen.